June 3, 1942. Dawn breaks over the shimmering waters of Pearl Harbor, but not as you remember them. The harbor is quiet, almost eerily so, yet the decks of the USS Yorktown are anything but. You can hear the clank of steel, the hiss of steam, and the low murmur of men racing against time. Every hammer strike, every shouted order feels like a heartbeat in a living machine. Only 3 days ago, Japanese pilots believed she was dead, sunk in the Coral Sea. To them, the Yorktown was a phantom, a name on a report that no longer cast a shadow in the Pacific. But here she is, battered but whole, rising from smoke and debris, her flight deck scuffed and scorched, yet ready. You can almost smell the acrid smoke still curling from damage that should have been fatal. Rear Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher paces the deck, his eyes scanning the horizon as if expecting an enemy to rise from the waves at any moment. Every sailor knows the impossible is being attempted. They're racing against a clock no man can stop. 72 hours to repair a carrier that should have taken months to patch. Steel is welded, engines tested, aircraft rearmed, and every man on the deck works with the precision of a clockmaker. In Tokyo, Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo sips his tea aboard the Akagi, unaware that intelligence reports have lied to him. His maps are clean. His briefings speak of a shattered American fleet. To him, Midway is theirs to take. To him, Yorktown is a ghost story, a casualty the U.S. cannot replace in time. But Fletcher knows better. He watches as the last of the fighter planes roll down the flight deck, engines screaming to life. Horns blast. The carrier lurches forward. A vessel thought lost is alive again, and every pilot who climbs into a cockpit knows history is about to pivot. And then a message crackles over the radio, something small, almost mundane, yet it will echo across the Pacific and into the mind of Yamamoto himself. A carrier that should not exist is coming. June 4, 1942. Somewhere above the turquoise expanse of the Central Pacific, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto leans over his chart table aboard the Akagi. Sunlight cuts through the cabin, highlighting the crisp folds of his uniform and the sharp glint of his medals. His eyes scan the formation of his 6 carriers, each a jewel in Japan's imperial crown. Victory is expected. Confidence is absolute. He doesn't know it yet, but the battlefield has shifted beneath him. Japanese intelligence reports proudly confirm what he already wants to believe. The American carriers were crippled at Coral Sea. One of them, the Yorktown, was supposedly gone forever. To Yamamoto, it's a perfect storm of luck and planning. There is no need to doubt, no need to worry. Yet aboard the Yorktown, the impossible continues. Aircraft mechanics wipe sweat and soot from their faces. Deck crews tighten every bolt, check every catapult, refuel and rearm the bombers and fighters that will soon storm the skis over Midway. Fletcher himself watches the horizon, calculating time, tide, and speed. Every second counts. Every man knows that if they fail, it's not just a ship that dies. It's a chance to turn the tide of the Pacific that slips forever. Meanwhile, Japanese lookouts scan the horizon for the phantom fleet they expect. Nothing appears. But at 6:45 hours, radar operators aboard the Yorktown pick up incoming bogies. Japanese Zeros slicing the sky, unaware their prey is alive. A chill cuts through the men on deck. They've been waiting for this moment, training for it, dreaming for it, and now it arrives. Yamamoto still believes he controls the game. He imagines he is untouchable, his 6 carriers invincible. But as the first American dive bombers climb into position, the illusion begins to shatter. One small mistake, one invisible enemy ship rising from the ashes. Could an entire empire be blindsided by a ship that refused to die? Back at Pearl Harbor, the decks of the Yorktown are a blur of motion. Sparks fly from welding torches, hissing steam fills the air, and men shout over the roar of engines. Every repair feels like a gamble with death. Every bolt tightened is a roll of the dice. You can almost feel the tension in the sweat-soaked faces of the crew. This isn't just maintenance, it's a race against time itself. Aircraft elevators lift Wildcats and dauntless dive bombers into the sun. Pilots strap in, checking their guns and bombs, their eyes reflecting both fear and awe. The ship groans as engines roar to life. Every motion, every explosion of power is precise, rehearsed, and nearly impossible. 72 hours earlier, the Yorktown was a floating grave. Now she is a war machine ready to strike. Fletcher walks the flight deck, issuing calm commands. Fuel those fighters, arm the bombers, we launch in 10. His voice carries over the chaos, steady as a heartbeat. Every man knows that failure here means more than just the end of a ship. It could mean the fall of Midway itself. Across the Pacific, Japanese signals officers are still unaware of the truth. In Tokyo, analysts mark reports. Yorktown sunk, morale shaken. Yamamoto believes the greatest threat neutralized. But every wave that crashes against Yorktown's hull, every plane that lifts into the sky, is a secret revelation that will soon ripple through the Japanese command. And then the impossible happens. American dive bombers lift off, engines screaming, as the Yorktown sails toward Midway. A carrier believed lost has returned to the fight, and the men aboard know they are about to rewrite history. Yamamoto will soon learn that the ghost he ignored is the one to haunt him. June 4, 1942. The sky above Midway Island burns with early morning light, but tension hangs heavier than the heat. Japanese pilots from the Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu sweep the horizon, expecting empty waters, unopposed, no resistance in sight. They had counted the American carriers as ghosts, victories already in hand. Then from over the waves a silhouette rises against the sun. A steel leviathan, her deck scarred but intact, her guns trained and ready, moving with purpose and defiance. Yorktown, alive, breathing, furious. On board the Japanese carriers, radio operators blink in disbelief at scattered reports from reconnaissance planes. Eyes widen, faces drain of color. One pilot murmurs under his breath, "That can't be," but there it is. The carrier they thought destroyed is leading the charge against them. Every plan Yamamoto had, every formation, every calculated strike, now teeters on the edge of collapse. Aboard Yorktown, Fletcher knows they are the surprise, the secret weapon no one expected. Dive bombers launch into the sky, climbing rapidly, engines screaming. Wildcats take off to guard the fleet, their machine guns ready. The rhythm of a well-practiced machine hums across the flight deck. Every sailor, every pilot is part of an impossible choreography. And in the mind of Yamamoto, confidence gives way to doubt. Did they miscalculate? Was intelligence wrong? How could a carrier presumed lost rise from the grave and challenge an empire? The Japanese fleet, once untouchable, is suddenly vulnerable in ways they never imagined. Every decision, every maneuver in the next few hours will hinge on one impossible truth. Yorktown is alive. The sun climbs higher over Midway, and the Pacific becomes a boiling cauldron of fire, smoke, and steel. Japanese dive bombers streak toward the island, expecting minimal resistance. American anti-aircraft guns erupt in deadly bursts, tracer rounds carving the sky. Every explosion, every whistling shell, feels like a heartbeat of war itself. From the deck of the Yorktown, Fletcher watches through binoculars as the first Japanese aircraft break formation. Dive bombers, once confident, are now torn by the realization. The Americans are not only alive, they are ready, precise, and lethal. You can almost feel the panic rising aboard the Japanese carriers, a slow burn that spreads from deck to deck. Then the Yorktown's dauntless dive bombers begin their descent. Nose plunging toward enemy decks, bombs locked and ready. Time slows. You hear the shriek of engines, the flash of metal, the roar of explosions. The Akagi erupts in flame. Kaga follows. Smoke rises in columns, black against the bright sky, curling like fingers choking an empire. Yamamoto watches helplessly as reports trickle in. 2 carriers destroyed, the third heavily damaged. His precision, his carefully calculated offensive, unravels before his eyes. The war he thought he controlled slips through his fingers, piece by piece. And at the center of it all, the Yorktown, the carrier that should have been dead, sails forward, a living testament to resilience and ingenuity. In those moments, the Japanese fleet realizes the terrifying truth. Intelligence was wrong. Confidence was a lie. One ship, resurrected against all odds, has turned the tide of the Pacific, and the empire that thought itself invincible is now on the defensive. By late afternoon, the scale of the disaster is undeniable. Smoke trails stretch across the horizon, and the once pristine formation of Japanese carriers is shattered. Yamamoto stands rigid on the Akagi's bridge, eyes scanning the burning silhouettes of Akagi and Kaga through the haze. His hands grip the rail as the truth crashes over him like a wave. The Americans had not only survived, they had struck back with deadly precision. Every calculation he made, every assumption about Coral Sea and the supposed destruction of the Yorktown has been upended. The carrier he believed gone is now the spearhead of his undoing. He can almost hear the whispers of history around him. One ship, resurrected against all odds, can topple an empire's plans. The confidence that had carried him through years of expansion, victories, and strategy is replaced by a bitter, grinding disbelief. Below decks, Japanese pilots return from failed sorties, their planes riddled with shrapnel, engines smoking. Officers argue over tactics, their voices rising and breaking against the clamor of the dying day. Yamamoto, normally the calm, unshakable strategist, finally allows a long, hard pause. He realizes that the tide has turned, not gradually, but in a violent, shocking instant. Meanwhile, Yorktown and her crews, exhausted and exhilarated, push forward. Every maneuver, every dive, every bomb dropped has cemented an impossible achievement. A ship once thought destroyed has become the linchpin of a historic American victory. And for Yamamoto, that realization comes too late. The empire he meticulously built, the strategy he believed unassailable, is unraveling before his eyes. One carrier at a time night falls over Midway, but the war above the waves rages on in a haze of smoke, fire, and exhaustion. The Japanese fleet, once a symbol of invincibility, drifts in disarray. Destroyers circle the damaged carriers, attempting repairs, firefighting, and damage control. Confidence has given way to desperation. Yamamoto, in his cabin, stares at the map of the Pacific, lines of ships and arrows now meaningless. His empire, he realizes, is no longer unchallenged. Across the horizon, the Yorktown lies battered but unbowed, her decks scarred, her flight crews drained, yet still operational. Fletcher watches the horizon with a quiet intensity. Every surviving plane, every functioning gun, every man who has endured the impossible represents a pivot in history. The Japanese miscalculation, the belief that Yorktown was destroyed, has shifted the balance of the Pacific in a single day. From Coral Sea to Midway, word will travel of a ship resurrected from apparent death. It will inspire American crews and terrify Japanese planners. The Yorktown's 72-hour miracle has not just saved a carrier, it has undone months of planning and forced a powerful navy into retreat. Yamamoto's confidence, once ironclad, has been shattered. And yet the night is not over. Decisions must be made, reinforcements called, plans rewritten. The men aboard Yorktown prepare for whatever comes next, knowing that their ship, once presumed lost, is now the pivot upon which history will turn. But how much more can a single ship endure, and how far will fate push her crew before the morning light brings the next wave of reckoning? Dawn breaks over Midway once again, painting the sky in shades of blood red and steel gray. On the Yorktown, silence replaces the chaos of yesterday. The deck is scarred, smoking from relentless bombardment, and yet the ship floats as if defying fate itself. You can almost feel the exhaustion in the sailors' shoulders, the grit on their hands, the weight of the impossible they just survived. Mechanics who welded engines in shifts that stretched through day and night, pilots who flew sorties with barely an hour to rest, gunners whose nerves never faltered. They are the living heartbeat of this vessel. Every man aboard knows the truth. They are part of a miracle. And yet they are haunted. Lives have been lost, planes destroyed, and every inch of deck is a reminder of what came so close to failure. On the Japanese side, Yamamoto's staff tally the damage in grim silence. Hundreds of men killed, planes lost, and the carrier fleet broken. What had been considered an unstoppable strike force now limps like a wounded animal across the Pacific. The psychological blow is immense, confidence eroded, pride shattered, and a bitter realization settling in that no intelligence, no careful planning, can anticipate the resilience of an enemy that refuses to die. In this quiet before the next storm, the Yorktown crew repairs, reloads, and steels themselves for the battles ahead. Every man carries a story etched into steel, smoke, and blood, a story of survival, ingenuity, and defiance. And somewhere in the Japanese command, Yamamoto sits, staring at the empty horizon where a ship should not exist, grappling with a truth that will haunt him for the rest of the war. Sometimes, one miracle can rewrite the fate of empires. By mid-morning, the repercussions of Yorktown's survival ripple across the Pacific like a shockwave. In Tokyo, Yamamoto convenes his remaining commanders, faces pale, voices tight with tension. Plans once immovable are suddenly fragile. The calculations that guided months of conquest are now obsolete, overturned by a single ship that refused to die. Across the ocean, radio signals hum with reports from Midway. American commanders, exhausted yet exhilarated, coordinate counterattacks and consolidate positions. The Yorktown, despite her scars, becomes the linchpin of the defensive line. Dive bombers, wildcats, and dauntless planes take off in precision sequences, each sortie striking fear into Japanese pilots who expected empty skis. Every bomb dropped, every strafing run, chips away at an empire's overconfidence. Yamamoto realizes with dawning horror that intelligence can lie, luck can deceive, and assumptions about the enemy can be fatally wrong. The carriers he believed destroyed are still alive. The fleet he thought untouchable is vulnerable. And in the distance, the Yorktown sails forward like a ghost from a nightmare he cannot shake. In this instant, the tide of the Pacific begins to turn. What seemed like a minor miscalculation, underestimating a single ship's resilience, now threatens to unravel Japan's plans entirely. Victory, once certain in the minds of imperial planners, is slipping through their fingers, and the Yorktown crew, battered, determined, and almost impossibly courageous, has become the fulcrum of a historic reversal. Weeks later, the Pacific is still reeling from what happened at Midway. News of the Yorktown's miraculous return spreads through American ranks, whispered in mess halls, shouted across decks, and chronicled in dispatches. She has become more than a ship. She is a symbol, a testament to ingenuity, perseverance, and the human spirit in the face of impossible odds. The Japanese Navy, meanwhile, is left to grapple with the consequences. Yamamoto's strategy, once hailed as flawless, is now forever marked by one cruel irony. A carrier he believed sunk turned the tide against him. The survivors of his fleet carry scars not just on their ships but in their confidence, shaken to its core. And every officer who underestimated the Americans learns the same lesson the hard way. Sometimes the dead rise, and when they do, entire empires can fall. Back on the Yorktown, Fletcher walks the deck, quiet for the first time in days. Sailors clean, repair, and ready the ship for the next engagement, but they also pause, knowing the story they lived through will echo far beyond the Pacific. They touched the impossible, survived it, and in doing so changed history. Yorktown's name will be remembered not for the day she should have died, but for the day she refused to, becoming the ghost that haunted Yamamoto's plans and secured a turning point in the war. In the vast expanse of the Pacific, amid fire and smoke, one fact remains unshakable. Sometimes, survival is the most lethal weapon of all, and sometimes history waits for a single miracle to redefine it.